Morning, everybody. 7 o'clock. I'm back. The Oscars also are back, not with a bang, but a slap. Will Smith won the Best Actor award for his portrayal of Richard Williams, the father of the tennis stars Venus and Serena. The ceremony will be remembered for what happened a few moments earlier when Smith walked onto the stage and smacked the comedian Chris Rock in the mouth for making a joke about his wife. Art imitates life. I look like the crazy father, he said afterwards. We're live in LA for you. It's Monday, the 28th of March.
Uh-oh, Richard! Oh, wow! Wow!
Just a few minutes after this happened, Will Smith won Best Actor for his performance in King Richard.
With tears rolling down his face, Will Smith was forced to use his acceptance speech to apologise to the Academy for slapping Chris Rock.
Rowing back, President Biden insists he wasn't calling for regime change in Russia when he said Putin cannot remain in power.
Mr. President, were you calling for regime change?
No!
More talks taking place this morning, with President Zelenskyy suggesting Ukraine could adopt a neutral status as part of a deal with Russia. The government pledges to drive up standards for maths and English in schools, speaking to the Education Secretary in just a few moments. Plus, one city, two lockdowns. Shanghai to shut down one half at a time in a bid to halt rising COVID cases. Also on the programme for you this morning, wherever you're watching us around the world, we'll speak to one of a group of vets who've come together to help people and animals alike in Ukraine. And William and Kate's Caribbean tour. We'll talk about how some things appeared to go so badly wrong with the royal biographer Angela Levin. Morning, everybody. It was an extraordinary night at the Oscars. In the space of a few moments, Will Smith came on stage and appeared to smack the host, Chris Rock, in the mouth for making a joke about his wife. And then he won the award for Best Actor.
Uh-oh, Richard! Oh, wow! Wow!
Smith won Best Actor for his portrayal of Richard Williams, the driven father who raised tennis stars Venus and Serena. Accepting the award, he offered a tearful apology to the Academy.
Now, I know to do what we do, you got to be able to take abuse. You got to be able to have people talk crazy about you. In this business, you got to be able to have people disrespecting you. I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees.
More on the Oscars later in the programme. First, the Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi is with us. Good morning, Minister. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning. We're going to hear more about the Education White Paper. You're very keen to highlight the increase or likely increase in funding, returning to 2010 levels by 2024-25. Why do you think that's a success?
Well, we had to come through the financial crisis and, of course, then the pandemic, where we've put $400 billion to work to support jobs and the economy, to be able then in the spending review to have $7 billion being invested in schools, in education, taking the total budget for schools alone to over $56 billion. So my total budget in the Education Department is $86 billion by 24-25. I think that's important, which is why, and by the way, that $7 billion is front-loaded, so $4 billion of it is coming early to make sure that we have the investment in our schools. Teachers have done an excellent job to make sure that 99.9% of schools opened and remained open through Omicron. So that investment is really important. It means, I hope, we can complete the journey, which is what my white paper does, of a family of schools, which is all the evidence suggests that schools that work together in a family of schools that's tightly managed, really well supported by a strong, and I underline strong, high-performing multi-academy trust, deliver better outcomes for the children. I'm very fond of talking about my background of being the 11-year-old who couldn't speak a word of English, but with parents who had the wherewithal to push me in and look where I am today. I want the system to work for every child, wherever they are, at the right place at the right time, even with those whose parents don't have the wherewithal or have no parents. That's what the white paper will do. It's a real ambitious target to make sure every school in our country is high performing in that family of schools working together.
So let's go back to why you say that there have been challenges on the budget. Of course, it's affected every department, but the health budget has increased by 42.4% by 2025 since 2010. The Department of Education only 2.8%. So there is the money there.
So what the Chancellor's done, if you look at actually across government, and health has had a big uplift because of the pandemic. Clearly, we had to deal. I was the vaccine deployment minister in health at the time.
40% more on health than education.
But education has also now caught up in the sense that we've got 7 billion going into schools. We've got 3.8 billion going into skills. You see on my lapel that T levels. That's,
Tory leader, as we always say.
Well, it's actually a fusion between an A level and an apprenticeship. That is what a T level, and we will make them as famous as A levels. Over 80 universities now accept T levels, or you can go straight into work as well. So, look, the investment is there. The white paper outlines how we're going to get there. The first thing you've got to do, by the way, the most important thing, and the greatest predictor of outcomes, is a great teacher in the classroom. We're investing $250 million in 500,000 teacher training opportunities. So from the early careers framework to the initial teacher training to the later on in life sort of professional development, big investment in teaching, big target to take, at the moment, only 2/3 of children complete primary school with the ability to read, write and do maths to an acceptable level. 2/3. That's not good enough. I want to get that to...
We only spend £5,000 a pupil on...
Well, I want to get that to 90%. 90%
We don't spend enough money.
We are so the OECD, I had Andreas Schleicher from the OECD in my office a couple of weeks ago. He said, on schools, you're right up there in terms of investment in education.
Compared to what?
Compared to other OECD countries. That's a good thing. Now, how that money's spent sometimes...
Because the Netherlands consistently places higher than the UK in world education rankings. They've placed over 6 times the amount of catch-up funding per pupil than the UK has.
So I've got 5 billion, as well as 7 billion, I've got 5 billion in catch-up money. You remember when I was doing the vaccines?
Yeah.
Right, I wasn't interested in how many vaccines we had in the warehouse. I wanted to know how many we get in people's arms. I've got 5 billion to spend on the national tutoring programme as part of that, getting those children with the least time left in education, the 16 to 19-year-olds, 800 million of that money, and of course focusing on disadvantaged children in primary and secondary. Let me get that money into the system, make sure that those students are getting that additional help, which they are. We've got 1 million blocks of tutoring that have already been delivered. We're going to deliver another 1 million by the end of this school year, 6 million in total by the end of this Parliament. And I will always be data-driven, evidence-driven. I will evaluate and I'll look how far we've got. We're doing well on primary school reading and maths catch-up. We need to do better at secondary. And I'll always go back for more. But let me actually get this right. It's no point having a sort of arms race. How much can I announce I'm spending? I've got to make sure it's actually working in the system. Scale is hard in anything you do. But having 10,000 academies already is great. I've got 22,000 schools in England. I want to complete that journey, but complete it with quality.
You need the money to do that. The catch-up czar, Sir Kevin Collins, he resigned, didn't he? He said the proposal that he presented the government was for £15 billion worth of funding. Why do you think he resigned?
Well, there was clearly a disagreement as to the
Well, you take these people on, you ask him to be an expert, and then he presents this report and you ignore him. No. I have a lot of time for Kevin Collins. I worked with him, in fact, when I was Children and Families Minister in the department 4 years ago. Why do you think he resigned?
But there was a disagreement over the quantum of investment. What I'm saying to you is I've got 7 billion going into investment in schools. I've got 5 billion on recovery. Let me do this well, and I can demonstrate to Kevin Collins and the rest of the country how well we've done on catch-up. Tutoring used to be the privilege of fortunate parents, wealthier parents. It's now available to every parent. I want parents watching this programme this morning to ask their schools, are they participating in the national tutoring programme? Because we want to make sure that we deliver 6 million blocks of 15 hours of tutoring for children for
It all
recovery.
comes down to the money, Minister.
We have 5 billion, and I'm going to make sure.
15 billion is what the catch-up czar says.
With respect to Kevin, I'm not interested in sort of announcing big numbers. I'm interested in how we're going to spend it to deliver better outcomes.
You say you're not interested in announcing big numbers, but we have the big numbers from the Chancellor saying that, you know, the big cheers in the House of Commons were going to take you back up to 2010 levels 14 years after we took power.
So, look,
How is that successful?
Well, I tell you why. Because we've had to come through a financial crisis. If we hadn't taken the tough decisions then, we wouldn't be able to spend the 400 billion that the Chancellor spent protecting jobs, protecting businesses, small businesses, making sure that 14 million people had that net of protection through the furlough scheme. And then we were hit by a global pandemic. You know,
but other departments had that problem as well. And as I said, it's chump change what you're getting compared to the National Health Service. I hear what you say about them needing the money for the pandemic. Let's talk about kids in schools, though, when it comes to food. You know, a lot of them need to have a hot meal at school because that's the only time they get it. 500,000 children are in absolute poverty.
So I saw the Resolution Foundation works, I think what you're referring to. What the Chancellor's done is earmarked 22 billion for this 1 year coming because of we're in a global battle, okay, against inflation. What does that mean? It means that your weekly shop is increasing, your utility bills are increasing. 22 billion for 1 year of help. 9 billion of it is going into helping people with energy costs. He's already announced that in February. We'll always review that. We'll look at what more we can do. But part of that, this Friday, the national living wage will increase, which means people get £1,000 more.
I mean, I'm sure that you'll be as appalled as I was to hear about a 14-year-old boy in Wandsworth who was in the queue at a food bank, collapsed through hunger and had to be taken to hospital. That's 21st century Britain, come on.
Well, I agree with you. That's heartbreaking, which is why I'm saying to you that the money, the 22 billion, I'm just trying to describe to you where it's going.
Yeah.
Right, 9 billion going towards energy. 1 billion, so the Chancellor in the spring statement doubled the amount going to local government. Your question about Wandsworth. Wandsworth will know where those families are that need the most help, the ones that you just described to me at the food bank, or the ones who are really struggling with their utility bills.
But you acknowledge that should not happen in 21st century
which is why he doubled the amount going to local government, so they can help those people directly, uniquely, to be able to go to those households and say, look, there is help available for you. 22 billion in 1 year is a big number, but we're not resting on our laurels. We're not saying job done. We're saying we'll keep an eye on this because energy prices are volatile at the moment. There is a global battle against inflation in America, in Europe, everywhere.
But no school child should go hungry in 21st century.
I don't disagree with that. I was the minister when I was children who introduced the Holiday Activities and Food Programme with Frank Field. We started with £10 million.
Labour, yeah.
Labour, absolutely right. It's now running at 220 million a year, and we've got the funding for the next 3 years to continue to deliver Holiday Activities and Food Programme. We're coming into a holiday period now. I'm very proud of the work we've done on that. We continue to support. We've just announced free school meals for children of parents with no recourse to public funds, which is important to make sure that child doesn't go hungry either. So we're doing a lot of work in this area, in the department. The important thing is education actually unlocks opportunity. You know, it's only when I began to think in the language, I remember having to learn and then read and try and speak it as well as I can, when I started to think in the language. And the best thing I can do for children is make sure there's a great teacher with a school that's strong and well supported in a family of schools everywhere, from Knowsley to Kensington. I don't believe that a child in Knowsley is less talented than a child in Kensington,
not.
right? They just don't have the opportunity, and I'm going to deliver that for them.
OK. But you're a former vaccines minister. Why do you think it's appropriate to stop you having free lateral flow tests?
So,
for NHS staff particularly.
So the Secretary of State for Health will say a bit more on this on the 1st of April, on what we're doing on testing. The important thing to remember is we have to live with the virus. Our first line of defence is vaccine. He's already announced a further 4th jab for the most vulnerable in society.
But I'm talking about lateral flow.
I hear you. The second line of defence is the therapeutics and the antivirals, which he's had the foresight, Sajid Javid, to buy those as well. Now, in some parts of the economy where we need to have further work in terms of testing. He will say more on that. But actually, between vaccine and our radar system, the ability to genome sequence, I think we're in a strong place to now continue to live with the virus. We're going to have to live with it, I don't know for how long, maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years.
But if people are going to elderly care homes or whatever, they need to have a test in order to go into that.
Yes.
That's £1,260 a year, something like that is the average calculation. That's a tax on caring.
Well, he'll say more about what will happen on lateral flow devices on the 1st of April. But ultimately, we're going to have to live with this virus. It is through the vaccination programme that you're going to protect populations. It's great that the UK population now has very high levels of antibodies because of the vaccination programme, not just the one I was responsible for, but then the booster campaign where he delivered so brilliantly, Sajid Javid, and of course now the 4th jab, and the antivirals and therapeutics. We have to get to a place, I think, where we transition this virus from pandemic to endemic. We're well on our way. We're probably the first major economy. I mean, just watching what's happening in China, this idea where people had a sort of zero COVID strategy is clearly not working. It's this is a virus that is aerosol transmitted. It is a respiratory virus. It's never going to work. The best thing you can do is protect the population through vaccination and then continue to make sure that the protection is there for the most vulnerable all the time.
And we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to know what you thought about what President Biden said. Did he misspeak at the weekend when he was talking about regime change in Russia?
Well, both the White House and the President have been clear on this. We are in lockstep with them. That is up to the Russian people to decide who governs them and the future
but he did say he couldn't remain in
country.
Power.
Well, I hear you, but...
do you back up those words?
Well, no, what I would say is up to the Russian people. I think the Russian people are pretty fed up, not only because they're watching their friends, and some of them have family in the Ukraine who've been attacked by the Putin regime. Clearly war crimes have been committed because they're targeting innocent civilians in civilian areas. The Deputy Prime Minister is working with the International Criminal Court to make sure that that evidence is in place. But I think President Biden is right to say that Putin has no place in the Ukraine. They have to make sure that they withdraw from Ukraine because it's an illegal invasion of the Ukraine. I think he's absolutely right in that. Ultimately, it's the Russian people who decide who governs them.
Do you agree that he's a butcher?
Well, I think there are war crimes have been committed in the Ukraine, no doubt, in my mind. The evidence is clear on that. It's right to collect that evidence because it's also important. My family had experience with Saddam Hussein. It's important that despots and dictators understand that there will be a reckoning. And that reckoning will come through the International Criminal Court in The Hague, as we've seen in Bosnia and, of course, in other parts of the world. It's really important. This is not something that should be taken lightly, that someone can go into a country illegally and start bombing civilians and feel that there is no there is no response from the global community. And I think in many ways the coming together of the world in this way has sent a very clear message to any dictator that they're not going to be able to get away with it in 2022.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
It's great to see you, as always. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Quick look at what's happening as far as the papers are concerned this morning. The front pages, The Telegraph leads with the fallout from Joe Biden's comments about a regime change in Russia. They say President Macron of France has also been trying to mitigate the political damage. The Eye leads on claims from Ukrainian military intelligence that Russia is planning to split the country into two along the lines of North and South Korea. The Express reports that the Chancellor is planning to cut council tax for millions of people to help with the cost of living crisis. And finally, The Star focuses on the way P&O Ferries is being run after those mass sackings earlier this month, with the headline, All at Sea. So return to LA, should we, and the Oscars. Accepting his award for Best Actor, Will Smith said, "I want to apologise to the Academy. I want to apologise to all my fellow nominees." Just a few minutes earlier, he'd walked onto the stage and slapped the comedian Chris Rock for making a joke about his wife. Here's Katie Spencer.
Oh, wow!
It wasn't supposed to be like this. Will Smith going off script, losing his temper at Chris Rock.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth! I'm going to, okay?
Apparently having enough of jokes at his wife Jada's expense.
That was a greatest night in the history of television. Will Smith!
Now, I know to do what we do, you got to be able to take abuse. You got to be able to have people talk crazy about you. In this business, you got to be able to have people disrespecting you. And you got to smile and you got to pretend like that's okay. But at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you.
His speech becoming a disturbing demonstration of the pressures of fame and the intensity of Hollywood.
Okay, Coda.
But Will Smith's trauma aside, a landmark moment for representation as a little indie film called Coda won Best Picture.
Troy Kutcher.
And for an event famed for self-indulgence, there was a lot of compassion for others in the speeches.
This is dedicated to the deaf community.
Sir Kenneth Branagh also dedicating his first ever Oscar to others.
We will never forget all of those lost in the heartbreaking, heartwarming, human story of that amazing city of Belfast.
And Jessica Chastain echoing that theme.
Suicide is a leading cause of death in the United States. It's touched many families. It's touched mine, and especially members of the LGBTQ community.
The war would inevitably feature, appropriately from Ukrainian-born Mila Kunis.
Recent global events have left many of us feeling gutted. Yet when you witness the strength and dignity of those facing such devastation, it's impossible to not be moved by their resilience.
But it will no doubt be remembered as the one where Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Rather than celebratory thanks, a winner forced to say sorry.
I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees. Hope the Academy invites me back. Thank you.
Katie's with us now in LA. Hi, Katie. Looks like you're having a ball there. Love the dress, love it. What on earth was all that about?
Look, what a strange night, Kay. Nobody saw that coming. I have to say, look, Vanity Fair is the party where they all come to hang out with people that are turning up with their gold statuettes. We've been trying and stop people to try and get their reactions and find out what they thought of what happened tonight. Will Smith, of course, a hugely popular man in this town. Nobody is willing to say anything so far. Nobody has wanted to comment. A lot of people that were at the Oscars that we've spoken to, Kevin Costner, who we just got a moment ago, said he was backstage at the time. We're getting that a lot. A lot of people were backstage, didn't see it, don't want to comment on it. So it's one of those things. It was just a strange moment. When we watched it, we at first were thinking, is this some sort of stage choreographed moment? It just didn't seem like something Will Smith, Hollywood nice man, would end up doing. In his defence, should we be taking into account the fact that he has been under a terrific amount of pressure this award season? The focus has been entirely on him throughout this. But I mean, this was his moment. 30 years within the industry. He's pretty much ruined his night. It's all anyone is going to be talking about now. The speech that he gave, he was in tears. He was talking about protecting his family. It ended up having to be an apology to the Academy. It certainly did not go to plan. Very unlikely he's going to turn up here, I have to say, Kay. We will be trying tonight to try and get some reaction for people, but certainly I think everyone's just really a bit stunned that this actually did happen.
Isn't it that, I mean, it's what, a couple of years now since people have been able to get together, am I right in saying, for the Oscars? So there's a frisson of excitement getting to the Vanity Fair party, etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. It always is quite fun, especially when people do come through with their statuettes. It has been a great night for British winners as well. I mean, we had Riz Ahmed winning his first actor, along with Neil Cassia for live-action short, who actually we had on Sunrise just a few months ago talking about that short. We also had Sir Kenneth Branagh winning. It was touch and go whether or not he was going to make it to the ceremony because he caught COVID after the BAFTAs. Thankfully, he was managed to make it to the ceremony to pick up his first ever Oscar. So hopefully we are hoping they will come our way tonight. I actually can see out the corner of my eye, not necessarily a recognisable name, but the visual effects people from June. June came across with the most awards tonight, picking up 6. So it's been a really good night, but yeah, just completely sort of overshadowed by this very strange moment with Will Smith, who I'd imagine is going home to bed not really sort of feeling like he's done a very good job of performing tonight.
OK, Katie, for now, thanks very much. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning. At 7:30, joined by an advisor to the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, to get his view on the latest round of peace talks. 20 to 8, we'll get reaction to what we've just heard from Nadhim Zahawi with the General Secretary of the National Education Union. And just after 8, we'll speak to Labour's Alison McGovern about the cost of living crisis. Before that, though, the Chinese city of Shanghai is to be divided in half for a 2-part lockdown, which will see authorities roll out an experimental COVID testing regime. Tom has more for us in Beijing. Hi, Tom. Just when we thought that it was safe to not have the lateral flows anymore, this is happening.
Morning, Kay. Yeah, I mean, it might seem extraordinary 2 years into the pandemic in Shanghai, 26 million people are going to be locked down. But this is China's zero COVID strategy, as it calls it. And it has worked really well so far. They've only registered around 4,600 official deaths. But Omicron has arrived here, and we've seen waves, outbreaks all across the country. Now, some cities have locked down entirely. Some provinces have locked down entirely, sealed themselves off from China. Shanghai's been trying to do something different. It's tried targeted lockdowns, telling individuals to stay at home. And what it's trying to do now is not have a full-on lockdown to restrict the spread, just a lockdown so that they can get 26 million people tested over the course of 8 days. They've said that lockdown will come to an end there. So this is sort of precision testing, but at a mass scale, if you will. But the question is becoming, can China keep this zero COVID up? If they find lots of cases in Shanghai, will they have to lock down? It's the only tool they have left. And will China ever learn to live with COVID? There's no indication from the authorities yet that they're willing to change their approach, especially with their elderly population relatively unvaccinated. This is about buying time, beating off this wave to build those defences so that China finally can, perhaps someday down the line, learn to live with COVID.
OK, for now, thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for explaining that out to us. It's been lovely, hasn't it, the last few days? Stand by.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Cooler and more unsettled this week, sadly. Wintry showers for some. It was nippy this morning. Some people might even see a bit of snow.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Check out these pictures that we found for you in the papers this morning. Katie in charge of pictures in the papers. But first, have a look at this. Thousands of people have fled their homes as a Philippine volcano continues to erupt. Looking at this image in the Telegraph, and this is an elderly lady, as you can see, who has succumbed to events in Ukraine. And the Eye, they have this picture of some artwork at Sotheby's, which just happens to be a massive 32 feet long. The piece depicts the Battle of Polio in India, which took place between British East India Company troops and the forces of the Tipu Sultan back in 1780. The clash was described as the severest blow that the British ever sustained in India. That's pretty comprehensive for you. Set to go to auction on Wednesday. It's expected to fetch between £500,000 and £800,000, which is nice. And the Times, lady in red. This is Kirsty MacLeod, who's from near Glastonbury. She spent, wait for it, 13 years working with 343 artisans from 46 different countries, embroidering this dress to tell women's stories. And there you go. How stunning is that? Glorious. Hello again, everybody. Monday morning breakfast show here on Sky News. Hope you're ready for the week ahead. The weather is going to get colder. We'll tell you more about that to come. But first, our top stories for you this morning.
Uh-oh, Richard! Oh, wow! Wow!
Will Smith has apologised after appearing to slap Chris Rock shortly before winning the Oscar for Best Actor at the ceremony in Los Angeles. President Biden has said he wasn't calling for regime change in Russia when he said that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. And the Education Secretary has told this programme reports of children collapsing at food banks are heartbreaking as the government prepares to set out its new schools white paper. In the last half an hour, the Education Secretary has told this programme that no children should go hungry in 21st century Britain. I'm sure that you'll be as appalled as I was to hear about a 14-year-old boy in Wandsworth who was in the queue at a food bank, collapsed through hunger and had to be taken to hospital. That's 21st century Britain, come on.
Well, I agree with you. That's heartbreaking, which is why I'm saying to you that the money, the 22 billion, I'm just trying to describe to you where it's going.
Yeah.
Right, 9 billion going towards energy, 1 billion, so the Chancellor in the spring statement doubled the amount going to local government. Your question about Wandsworth. Wandsworth will know where those families are that need the most help.
I also spoke to the Education Secretary about unfolding events in Ukraine. He told me that he thinks war crimes have been committed in the country and said there would be a reckoning for dictators.
I think there are war crimes have been committed in the Ukraine, no doubt, in my mind. The evidence is clear on that. It's right to collect that evidence because it's also important. You know, my family had experience with Saddam Hussein. It's important that despots and dictators understand that there will be a reckoning.
And Tamara's here with us now for her take on what's going on. Tamara's take at 9 o'clock, of course, but a quick thought on what we heard.
So the Education Secretary says that, you know, he's appalled by the idea that children are going hungry in 2022. He's announcing a whole load of new targets today for schools, including that children leaving primary school should be meeting acceptable standards in reading, writing and maths. He says only 65% of them do at the moment. He wants it to be 90% in 2030, still some way off. Now, Labour and some of the unions are saying, does this whole plan lack a bit of ambition? Isn't this what parents should expect already? And some in the education world saying that this cannot be divorced from the cost of living crisis, because if children haven't got enough food, haven't got enough heating, aren't in the right housing, then it's very difficult for them to meet these targets at school. The Education Secretary says that although there's no new money being announced today, that all the money, the £5 billion announced for catch-up after COVID, would feed into this. But still, there's been a lot of criticism that even the schemes the government has already announced, like tutoring to help those who are falling behind, have not been as well targeted as they could be. So he'll be judged on whether these targets are advanced towards. But of course, these targets are still years away from being realised.
OK. Tomorrow's take 9 o'clock, as I said. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much indeed. He also talked actually about Ukraine. Let's talk about it in more detail, should we? President Zelenskyy has suggested that the country could adopt neutrality as part of a peace agreement with Russia. More peace talks will take place today in Turkey. Let's speak to Oleg Ustenko, economic advisor to the Ukrainian president. Hello to you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the programme. Let's just start with a situation update, should we? What's it like in Kiev today?
So look, the whole night in Kiev we heard sirens all the time. People were hidden in the bomb shelters almost the whole time. Only, you know, a couple of hours very close already this time, people were able to get out from the bomb shelters. Russians continue to bomb the whole country. You know that already some cities are completely destroyed. For example, the city of Mariupol, which we all knew before, completely destroyed, not like 95% as we claimed before, completely destroyed. You will not be able to find any place in the city which is not destroyed. 60-70% of the city of Chernihiv is almost destroyed. Russian soldiers are bombing and sending the missiles to social infrastructure. Again, more than 100 hospitals were destroyed. The city of Kharkiv is almost 70% destroyed. So everything, they continue to send their missiles. And what really, you know, troubled me is that West is still sending bloody money to Vladimir Putin. Buying gas from Russia, buying oil from Russia is translated to making a crime. Look, When we are talking about sending money to regime of Vladimir Putin, in terms of buying the oil and not putting an oil embargo, it means that we are sending globally, we are sending $1 billion daily to finance Russian military machine. It's completely unacceptable. After United States already introduced embargo on Russian oil, Europe is still not doing the same. We see discussions, we see plans, we see politicians who are making different statements, but in our view, it's completely unacceptable. For us here in Kiev, for our people who are needed to be hidden in shelters, kids who are killed, 150 children were already killed in Ukraine. More than 1,000 women were already raped by Russian soldiers. We fixed everything. And our General Prosecutor Office is also fixing another information related to financing war crime. Because everybody who is sending the money to finance military machine of Russia, for us is also a financing a war crime. We are keeping all this information. We are keeping information in terms of delivering of Russian oil from all Russian ports all over the world. We established a special group, which is 24 hours, 7 days a week, tracking the movements of all Russian ships from Russian ports. And what is really terrible, that some of these ships are still going to Europe. So the question which I am raising is how it could be the whole civilized world is trying to stop this war together with Ukrainians, but at the same time, sending money to finance this war is completely unacceptable.
Okay.
So we are going to win this war, and we are going to sue everybody who was financing the killing of our people when he was buying or she was buying or the company was buying the oil from Russia.
I wonder if I could ask you this. I'm just reading that the Ukrainian president, your boss, has said that Boris Johnson, our prime minister, is helping more than other leaders in the resistance against Russia, thanks to the direct pressure from the British people. Whereas it goes on to say in the interview that the French president is afraid of Russia. Do you echo those sentiments by the president?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, already since the beginning of invasion, and even before that time, I understand that Boris Johnson and Vladimir Zelenskyy, that they were always in touch on different matters, but including matters related to our security. It's definitely not my topic. But yes, this is absolutely right. I know that they are in constant touch. I know that they have always checking the positions with each other. I know that the great supporter of Ukraine is the United Kingdom, and we are very grateful and we appreciate all the support we are having from this great country, from your great country. And we know that it's not the question of even economic help or financial support. It's not about humanitarian support, which we are also receiving from the UK, and it's not about our refugees who are currently also within the UK, but it's also about the attitude of people of the United Kingdom, which we feel here in our bomb shelters all over Ukraine. So really, we are extremely grateful for that. But we need to do more. We need to stop Putin. And for me to stop Putin, it's not only our brave soldiers who are fighting against this army. It's not our people who are fighting against the Russian army, but it's also an economic steps which we have to make. And this economic step for me, which is an immediate step, this week we have to cut off his machine out of this bloody money he is receiving for his oil. And also, look, remember that 40% of the Russian budget revenue is coming from oil, 40%. So can you imagine if we are cutting this, if we are cutting off his regime out of this money, it means that they will not be able to buy missiles, to buy other weapons, bombs, to kill our people in Ukraine. So I think that we need to do that, and we need to put pressure for those who still are trying to make their minds. And I am talking here about Germans. It's completely unacceptable. You know, it's not the time when Germany can continue to discuss the issue. The issue is very clear. Either you are on our side or you are trying to play the games and you are financing this military machine against us. This is unacceptable. Yeah, and it's not because of, even economic issues. It's because of morality. And I do not accept, and in Kyiv, we do not accept any talks like it's going to be negative economic consequences. Yes, they are going to be, but they are going to be in a very short run. Yes, in a very short run.
Let me just ask you one final question before I let you go. I know that time is pressing, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. How do you think the peace talks will go? There's another round of talks in Turkey, isn't there, later?
Yes, our group is already in Turkey today. They are starting today. We have a lot of hopes for these talks. I think that this is, I could not comment more on this issue.
Okay. Please keep safe. We do appreciate you taking the time to join us. Be safe in the knowledge. I don't know if you saw the demonstration in one of our squares in central London, Trafalgar Square, at the weekend. Tens and tens of thousands of Brits and tourists as well, who were all carrying your flags and standing united with the people of Ukraine. Please be aware that there is support for you here in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate that very much. And thank you for that you are standing this Ukraine. Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. On my behalf and on behalf of my president.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Brave men, one and all, aren't they? And women. Let's get more now on the government's forthcoming schools white paper and plans for schools to offer a 32.5-hour school week by 2023. Joined now by the General Secretary of the National Education Union. That's Kevin Courtney. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. I'm sure you heard the Education Secretary speaking on this programme just a few moments ago. What did you make of what he had to say?
Well, I didn't actually hear because I was the sound wasn't coming through. But I've been talking with civil servants before today about what the white paper says, and I've seen some of the things that he's been saying. And I have to say, this is the first schools white paper for 6 years. And I'm afraid it's a damp squib. It doesn't address the things that we have learnt coming through the pandemic. It doesn't deal with the significant issue of child poverty. It doesn't deal with school funding. It doesn't deal with the profound problem of teacher recruitment and retention. Instead, Nadhim Zahawi is setting targets. He's setting targets for children, but not putting extra funding in or extra support for schools. He's setting targets on this school day length. Actually, the vast majority of schools already hit that target. And in the few that don't, quite often they've compressed their lunch hour for a good reason. They're a rural school and they've got difficulties with school transport, etc. And then finally, he set this target for schools joining multi-academy trusts, where really he has provided no evidence that that is a good thing in educational terms, and no proposals for reform of maths, allowing schools to have a vote in a math or allowing schools to leave a math if it doesn't provide a good service to them. So a damp squib of a white paper, I think.
OK, although the Education Secretary, if he were here, would say in response, because I did press him on that particular point, he says that he's managing to get more money for the department than had previously been thought possible. And he's hopeful that that money will go where it's needed and targeted most.
Well, the government appointed Kevin Collins a year ago in the pandemic, 2 years ago in the pandemic, to give them advice on what education needed post-pandemic. And he said that schools needed £15 billion in order partly to organise tutoring inside the school, not a privatised system outside, and also that schools would be given extra resources to provide things for children outside the school that needed catch-up, needed education recovery. None of that money is coming through, nothing like that 15 billion. Kevin Collins told us that 15 billion was, roughly speaking, what the Americans were putting in, what the Dutch were putting in. We're not getting that from this white paper. So there was some money announced previously, and Nadhim Zahawi is telling us that that money is still available, but it's not new money, and it's not the sort of money that you need to make the changes in children's lives that we need to make.
What about, I didn't get a chance because we were out of time, but I didn't, what's happening as far as COVID is concerned? I'm reading that some schools, 20% closed, 200,000 kids are off with COVID-19. Is it something that's in our rearview mirror, or is it still a real problem in our schools?
I mean, it's a real problem in schools. And that is not to say that, I mean, the vaccination has been such an enormous thing, and you can see that it can start to, it is the way out of this crisis. But in schools right now, 10% of staff off with COVID, something like that, that's leading to enormous stress on those who are left behind. So if you look on Twitter, you can find head teachers saying things like, I'm a head teacher, I've been having to teach classes all week. My staff are off sick, I'm having to prepare their lessons. Other staff are having to double up in that sort of way. Enormously stressful in schools. So we've been saying to government that at the very minimum, they should allow schools to still have access to testing. That if you've got cold symptoms, you should be allowed to test so that you know if it's a cold, and you can, you've got a bit of a sniffle, you would still go into school. But to distinguish between a bit of a sniffle that is a cold where you can still go into school, and COVID, where you shouldn't go into school because you will end up with more staff, more children being off. This is a real worry for teachers, for support staff, for head teachers in the run-up to the SATs, where it's clear. I mean, we've got doubts about the SATs every year. I have to say to you, we don't think they're not a useful measure. But this year, there are schools where the Year 6 class has been entirely disrupted. There's stress on the children building up to those. So we need to really address that, remove those SATs, remove the league tables attached to the SATs from it for this year. The same thing is happening in secondary schools. There is real pressure around the exams. We're in favour of the exams going ahead, but the government should be doing more to help us control the number of COVID cases in schools so there is less disruption running up to those exams.
OK, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time. Much appreciated. Returning now to Ukraine and the humanitarian crisis that has become one of the defining aspects of the war. Tom Dannett, the founder of Street Child, and Val, a volunteer for local charity in Ukraine called Pumishka, joining us now. Hello to you both. Ladies first, tell me about the challenges that you're facing, Val.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, Ukraine and Ukrainian people, Ukrainian children, boys and girls, we all feel, disruption of our life, of our, lifestyles, and, lots of people, millions of people, more than 10 million of people are pushed to leave, to flee their houses and their places of living, and get adopted to the new conditions of life in the war times. And that's about enormous stress. That's about, basic needs which are not met. Food, water, this is what we need right now. And the children, families' well-being, this is what we need to restore. But it's not possible while we live in the constant fear of shelling, of bombing, and living under conditions of, being threatened and being under fear of death and direct threat to our health and well-being.
Yeah, let me bring in Tom as well, if I may, founder of Street Child. Tom, what are you doing? What's your charity doing to try to help?
Yeah, thanks, Kay. So Street Child, wherever we work in the world, partners with great local organisations on the ground. So we're partnering with Pumishka, Val's charity, and we're seeking to meet those precise needs that she described. Right today, we're launching what we're calling a child-friendly centre together with Posmika in Ukraine. It's a centre where children can come and play and have some normality, as well as accessing some basic services. So we're there for the children of Ukraine. We can only make a difference through partner organisations on the ground, and that's what we're trying to do with the donations that we're receiving from the British public.
And Val, tell me a little bit more about the charity. I think Pomishka means smile, doesn't it?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I'm talking on behalf of local charitable organization, which is called Posmishka UA. It's not formally interpreted for smile, but yeah, you're right. This can be interpreted like smile in the English language. And this is the charitable foundation which has the main office in Zaporizhia city. Zaporizhia is in the southeastern part of Ukraine. Now the main part of the region is already occupied, and Zaporizhia is directly affected by the enormous number of internally displaced people being evacuated to Zaporizhia, which is the main accepting point of those who come from Mariupol, which is in Donetsk Oblast, and other occupied regions, towns, settlements in Zaporizhia Oblast. Our charitable foundation have filled offices in Donetsk Oblast, and we still have child protection specialists, social workers, psychologists who continuously deliver support for those who are directly affected and struggling.
I'm just going to jump in there, if I may, because we're almost out of time. Less than a minute left on the programme. Tom, what do people do who are watching at home if they want to help? If you quickly as you could, please.
Yeah, donate to Street Child, and we will get money as quick as we can into the hands of brilliant people like Val and her colleagues, and that will make us help a fantastic difference to children in unimaginable circumstances.
OK. Guys, we must leave it there. Thank you for explaining what you're doing. You know that the British public have huge hearts, and I'm sure that they will support you. Come back and talk to us very soon and tell us how you're getting on. Thank you.
Thank you.